Begin our prayers and thinking by using El Kalum, the All. Chapter 1, The Creation. Tablet 5, The Journey of Nibiru. Lo. The planet Tiamat was a site used for excavating different metals, elements, and minerals such as plutonium, chlorine, chlorophyll, ammonia, gold, platinum, and silver, as well as scanning the ocean floors for other elements that were beneficial to these beings in other planets. In the depths of the oceans of this planet Earth are some of the most valuable resources for human life, such as food, such as kelp, different types of fish, and energy sources, such as iodine. In these waters are an abundance of dissolved gases such as nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and oxygen. Other substances are nitrates, phosphates, which are needed by plants for photosynthesis. Silicon dioxide is necessary in building of skeletal materials in some marine organisms. Remaining elements that are essential to marine life include iron, manganese, cobalt, and copper. Several mineral resources lie on the ocean floor and in solutions above it, such as salt, magnesium, and bromine. Seawater contains all the dissolved substances necessary for the growth of plant and animal life. Other beings know of these resources, and thus they have made many visits, taking what they excavated back to their homes, and they continue to make visits to this planet and even live under the seas. Tiamat was also used as a hunting ground and resort. Beings would intergalactically travel from planet to planet, doing what was called planetary shopping. Some of the planets in this galaxy were most frequently visited because life existed there in various forms were Lamu, meaning deity of war, now called Mars, Kishar, meaning foremost of the firm lands, now called Jupiter, including many others in Orion's, meaning skies or heaven, six-star sun constellation, Kamu, meaning to be wealthy, which is the Pleiades constellations, having 7-star suns, and Aish, to lend aid, to help, also known as the Plowman, Arcturus, as well as Clarion, or Clarion, meaning clear, just to name a few. The boundless universes are filled with all kinds of life forms that come from all types of origin, and your planet Earth held the most abundant of life sources, which is why all kinds of beings frequently visited. Now let me continue. On one of these routes to the planet Earth, the planet craft Nibiru, meaning planet of the crossing, also called Meldek, was making a routine trip, which was then on an orbit that took 1,024 years short of an equinox of Earth time, which was a 25,920-year orbit called AMS by the Anunnaki. This craft, being 4 times the size of the planet Tiamat, whose diameter was 15,852 before the splitting, which cut it into 2 equal halves, and Nibiru's diameter being 63,408. The ship Nibiru came in search of other planets that were rich in natural resources and minerals to take back to the planet Risk, to protect it from the damaging ultraviolet rays. And what would make you understand what ultraviolet rays are? Ultraviolet of or relating to the range of invisible radiation, wavelengths from about 4 nanometer on to the border of the X-ray region to about 380 nanometers just beyond the violet in the visible spectrum. We're looking at the word ultra, meaning beyond, from the Latin ultra from ultra, meaning beyond, and the word violet, meaning the hue of the short wave end of the visible spectrum, evoked in the human observer by radiant energy with wavelengths approximately 380 to 420 nanometers. Any of a group of colors, reddish blue in hue, that may vary in lightness and saturation from the Middle English, from Old French, violet, diminutive of viole, from Latin viola. As for the color red, the hue of the long wave end of the visible spectrum, it has invoked in the human observer by radiant energy with wavelengths of approximately 630 to 750 nanometers. Any of a group of colors that may vary in lightness and saturation and whose hue resembles that of life liquid called blood. One of the additives or light primaries from the Middle English, from Old English, reed or red. And as for the color blue, the hue of that portion of the visible spectrum lying between green, which is yellow and blue, and indigo, which is blue and violet, and it is evoked in the human observer by radiant energy with wavelengths of approximately 450 to 490 nanometers. Any of a group of colors that may vary in lightness and saturation, one of the additives or light primaries from the Middle English blue, from Old French bleu, of Germanic origin. As for the word ray, it's a thin line or narrow beam of light or other radiant energy, radiance light. On the prism, it appears as purple, ranging from violet to red. And now, with an understanding of ultraviolet rays, you must be able to grasp the damage that it was doing in risk and is doing here on Earth. The danger is the destruction of the ozone. As it happens there, it's also happening here. What is ozone? A blue gaseous allotrope of oxygen. O3 formed naturally from diatomic oxygen by electric discharge or exposure to ultraviolet radiation. It is an unstable, powerful bleaching, poisonous, oxidizing agent with a pungent, irritating odor used to deodorize air, purify water, treat industrial waste as a bleach. Fresh, pure air, from German ozon, from Greek ozon, neuter, present principle of ozine, meaning to smell. So in order for the Riskians to protect their planet, they sought out gold. The gold of this planet is good. This great planet-sized ship, Nibiru, came nearer to your solar system, traveling at the speed of light, 186,272 miles per second. Yet it is found to be exactly 186,282.396 miles per second, or 299,792,458 kilometers per second. It came from Ilion, the 19th galaxy, a tri-solar system having 3 suns, also called the Great Galaxy, known as the place on high, called Heaven, or even Jannat, on a journey through the stars that took 25,920 years. A year is called an Am by the Sumerians, who were taught by the Anunnaki. This great ship Nibiru, as it was later known, was a mothership, and Nibiru at that time held 12 smaller cylinder ships, called Shams, that were to be launched out from it. When Nibiru reached its destination, Nibiru was equipped with 4 separate atmospheres. What would make you understand what the 4 atmospheres are? They are: 1. Outside of the spheres, where there is no air, and there is 1 atmosphere. Nibiru is able to adjust to that environment. 2. When you come into this dome-like planet where there is oxygen and air, Nibiru is capable of adjusting to that environment. 3. When you go to the Antarctic, you would have to take your craft into the glaciers. Nibiru is capable of adjusting to that environment. 4. When you have to take your craft beneath the sea, Nibiru is capable of adjusting to that environment. That is the 4 separate atmospheres that all the crafts titled Nibiru as a part of the Nibiru fleet is capable of adjusting to. That is, they are capable of adjusting to all atmospheres of changes, such as Ta, earth, Mu, water, Nifu, air, and Set, fire. The command to activate these is simply Tamunefeset. Nibiru and all of its crafts were also equipped with 4 separate magnetic fields, which is a person, a place, and an object, or a situation that exerts attraction. 1. Nibiru is capable of being magnetized or attracted by a magnet, meaning 2. To operate by means of magnetism, such as a magnetic recorder. 3. Relate to the magnetic poles of the earth, such as a magnetic compass bearing, having an unusual power or ability to track. A gravity form of magnetism from the whirling vortex of each planet at 30 degrees and its magnetic attraction, creating a magnetic grid, the flow of electricity when an object comes in contact with its pulling or attracting powers, and magnetic attraction by appearance, emotion, or desire. The Grand Mothership Nibiru can hold many thousands of crown-shaped ships, but this mission had only 2,880 crown-shaped shams. It also has a fleet of 24 crystal cities with crystal-like domes, giving them the ability to break down light as a prism would and be able to make use of the energy. It has solar panels that are the size of a pin's head or less than that, and can generate millions and millions of megawatts of energy as well. As Nibiru passed by various suns or stations set up in the galaxy, Nibiru drew an energy charge from them. Nibiru was set up for holographic interdimensional transport. That is, it is capable of cloning itself holographically to appear in more than one place at a time, making it virtually impossible to determine which is the holographic projection from the original. Nibiru is capable of traveling distance from point to point or through space and time interdimensionally. It can go through time, future or past, without interfering with the principle of now or then. And it manned over 144,000 crew members headed by 24 elite beings called Yahwehans, 12 Yah, agreeable, and 12 Weh, disagreeable, that stood 7 feet tall. However, on this flight, the craft Nibiru had to first pass by the planet E, which means he whose house is water, and is now called Neptune, as it did many times before. The planet E, Neptune, is a twin planet to the planet Anu, Uranus. By twin planet, I mean that Neptune is very similar, and in some aspects, identical to the planet Uranus. The planet Uranus was originally called Kakab Shanama, the planet which is the double. Uranus is also influenced by the gravity of Neptune. The gases that make up the atmosphere of Neptune and Uranus are exactly the same. The sizes of Neptune and Uranus are similar. Their colors are identical and their rotational times are similar. Uranus being 17 hours in Earth time and Neptune's being 16.5 hours. The planet Uranus practically rotates laying down, so the size, if looked at from the wrong angle, can surely be mistaken. Uranus tilts at the extreme angle of 98 degrees. You could almost say that the planet lies on its side as it travels around the sun. This means that the north and south polar regions of Uranus experience alternate periods of day and shadow hour, and summer and winter, each of which is up to 42 Earth years long. The temperature of this planet Uranus on the side that is hidden from this sun is the same as on the side facing this sun. As Nibiru came nearer to Neptune, its gravitational pull caused electrical storms on that planet on that Friday afternoon at 1300 hours of Earth time, some 24 billion years ago of Earth time, and caused Nibiru to go slightly off its orbit. As the craft Nibiru passed by Neptune, the planet Anu Uranus came from behind the planet Neptune, and it caused the appearance of a bulge. And that bulge pulled on Nibiru's orbit and caused the great ship Nibiru to begin to wallop in its orbit from fear of crashing. This happened because the planet Uranus was not originally seen in this solar system when Nibiru made its first visit. Uranus, moving from behind Neptune, caused Nibiru to veer off its own original path in order not to hit Uranus, and made it collide into another planet then called Meldek, also called Vulcan. The original name for the planet Vulcan is Meldek. Meldek was between Lahmu, Mars, and Kishar, Jupiter. Meldek was 27,500 miles in diameter. Meldek had a population of billions living under the seas in this sub-city of Karna, which was occupied by the Meldekians, and Vador, which was occupied by the Troglodytes. Meldek also had 2 moons. This was the planet of Masmukia, or Troglodytes, Dragons, and Voltex. The Troglodytes' average height is 3.5 to 4.5 feet, and their heads are extremely large. These were the slaves. However, the ruler, the Meldekians, were very large in size, from 7 to 9 feet in height, scales of multiple colors, in which they shed like all other reptilians. They lay eggs for reproduction. The Troglodytes have 2 round eyes without pupils, and no ears or protruding nose, just 2 small holes in the nose area. Their mouth are slits without lips. The Troglodytes are hairless and have no teeth. The Troglodytes' hands have 4 webbed fingers and no thumb. The Troglodytes live totally underwater in great cities with many great biologists. Because they lived underwater, if the planet sped up, it wouldn't affect them because gravity is different underwater, meaning gravity is the force that the Earth exerts on an object. The force of gravity is relatively constant all over the surface of the Earth except for in a few places like the equator, and varies slightly at different altitudes. Many people think, for instance, if a steel ball was dropped from a building and a cotton ball, that the steel ball would fall a lot faster when the cotton ball only lags slightly behind. So the force was still constant. Water is denser than air, so objects move slower through water than air. The impact of the crash affected the beings on the surface of the planet of Meldek, and not underneath the waters because water is more dense and would slow down the object. So the impact would be less damaging and the shock of the impact would be less severe. However, it was daylight, so most of the beings came on land. All of the beings that could have negotiated were dead due to the crash. The only beings that survived were the ones under the seas, which were the military and the warriors, who were looking for a chance to fight anyway. Nibiru had no way of contacting the beings on the planet Meldek to let them know that it was an accident and not a deliberate attack. Telepathic communication was forbidden to prevent interference by other telepathic disagreeable beings. This was because the Meldekians were not part of the Interplanetary Confederation. Their star fleet of warriors, a group of reptilians who bore the symbol of a reptile, who called themselves Ninga, meaning warrior, launched an attack. Thinking that the planet Meldek had been attacked, 4 fighter ships of Ninga fleet launched out, and it went off its orbit into the universe, attacked with the intentions of destroying Nibiru. These 4 ships, equipped with a high explosive created of plutonium from Meldek's starfleet called Ninga, managed to escape Meldek as Nibiru passed by and followed in Nibiru's path. Nibiru put up its 4 magnetic force fields, which were created by Anu and given to Murdoch, and destabilized the 4 attacking ships. Nibiru created the magnetic cube called Kappa. These 4 great ships called the Ninga fleet moved on as 4 powerful winds that were trapped by Nibiru's force field and unable to break loose. Meldek is now referred to as the Lost Planet. The 4 fighter ships of the Ninga fleet were called the North Wind, South Wind, East Wind, and West Wind. These 4 fighter ships that originally surrounded Nibiru had appeared to launch an attack were now trapped. The great ship Nibiru activated its 4 magnetic force fields, incapacitating these ships. All of their controls and equipment ceased to function. A force field was put up, and they were trapped in the environment of Nibiru. Its new wobbly satellites were caught in Nibiru's gravitational pull and began to circle, making 4 whirlwinds. Nibiru immediately launched 2 ships to return to Ilium to inform the elders of the incident in case of the need for assistance. Nibiru proceeded to move counterclockwise from the planets in this solar system. Nibiru pulled in towards Anshar, which means foremost of the heavens, now called Saturn, and its force field kissed off the planet, and its gravitational pull caused Nibiru to veer off its own orbit, and 3 satellites were added to Nibiru's force field called Evil Winds, Whirlwinds, and Matchless Winds. The orbit that Nibiru was originally on was a 25,920-year orbit called Ams. It shifted into a new orbit of 3,600 years called Ashar. Its orbit was caught in this solar system, always to make a return. Then Nibiru bounced off the planet Rum, Titan, which now surrounds Anshar, Saturn, and sped up its motion, creating the Saturn rings, referred to as the necklace of Saturn. At this point, Gaga, Pluto, was released from its natural orbit around the Sun and was pulled away in the direction of Lahmu, Mars, and Lahamu, Venus. The path of Nibiru was now bent even more towards the center of the solar system, directly towards Tiamat, which means Maiden of Life, now called Earth. As it moved into your solar system, Nibiru caused problems amongst the other planets in this solar system by pulling their moons. Nibiru, making one complete spin, threw the winds off into space. The approach of Nibiru began to disturb Tiamat, and this alarmed the beings of Tiamat that something was entering their atmosphere, causing volcanoes, eruptions, storms, hurricanes, and floods. Tiamat was forced to launch 11 ships headed directly for this bright gleaming, or what appeared to be a planet entering into their airspace. It was Nibiru. This star fleet of 11 ships from Tiamat was led by Kingu, the great emissary, which was once ruled by the Meldekian deity Luna. The great ship Nibiru had 7 warships accompanying her, and they were launched at the 11th ship that were launched from Tiamat. Kingu was the name of the head defense force of Tiamat, and it later became the name of an imperfect planet, now called Amun, one of many moons, which was originally the companion planet of Tiamat before the crash of the satellites of Nibiru. The 11 ships which were launched from Tiamat at Nibiru were immediately detected by the force field of Nibiru and eliminated. One of the 4 satellites that came with Nibiru from Meldek, called the North Wind, was lined directly for Tiamat. The impact of the North Wind caused Tiamat to split into 2 parts because of the high explosives that the ship contained, called plutonium. The hole which the North Wind bore into Tiamat caused the upper half of Tiamat to wallop in its orbit, setting large portions of it on fire. The North Wind then came back around, shattering that half into pieces, making comets, of which Halley's Comet is one, and asteroids. Comet, coming from the Greek kometes, long-haired star, from comb, hair. The length of time a comet takes to complete its orbit is known as its period. Some comets have periods of less than 7 years. Comets are considered a part of the solar system, since they never leave the limits of the same system. The comet's tails always points away from the sun due to the pressure of the sun's light on the dust particles, and is usually 5,000 miles in length. Comets are often caught by a planet's gravitational pull, which causes them to shift from their course. Many of the pieces of the comet that caught on fire form the asteroid belt that is in the center of this solar system. The East Wind, another tremendous ship from Meldek, coming with Nibiru from Meldek, swung around and put a hole straight through the upper half of the planet. The planet Tiamat had turbulence and was unstable, while other planets nearby were still wobbling in their orbits. Tiamat was pulled in many directions. On one side by the 2 larger planets Lahmu, now called Mars, and Kishar, foremost of the firmlands, Jupiter, on one side, and the 2 smaller planets, Lahamu, Venus, and Mumu, one who was born, Mercury, on its other side, all pulling and tugging. Nibiru's ship broke off into 2 separate fleets, the first 4 circling the planet Tiamat, which is now called Ki, creating a net-like web, which was a magnetic field. One of the 3 warships from the second part of the fleet of 7 from Nibiru, located on the outskirts of the force field, then launched a bright flame of light much like ball lightning. The ball lightning was filled with brilliance, and it pierced straight down through into Tiamat, completely neutralizing Tiamat's electric and magnetic force field. A portion of this massive ball of light, which was launched by one of the 3 warships from Nibiru, was called the West Wind, and also known as the Evil Wind, tore straight down as ball lightning into the center, exploded, and gauged out a large hollowed space in the center of Tiamat. And the West Wind became a tremendous 600-mile diameter sun called Sol, and was trapped and placed there, with the sunscreen to direct the heat waves through the North Pole away from the planet, creating the northern lights, or what is called aurora borealis, which are solar flares or sun flares. This ball of light, now in the center of Tiamat, was named Afsu, meaning one who exists from the beginning, and the place was named Ishara. 3 satellites launched off of Nibiru, creating a tetrahedron, 4-sided force field of energy, at a 19.5 degree angle around the new half of Tiamat, with the hole through it, and a smaller sun, Sol, also called Apsu, was placed inside Tiamat's center. Now, this newly formed planet, Tiamat, called Ki, New Earth, was trapped in its orbit, where no planet had been orbiting before, protected by forces, by the guidance of these ships, while she healed herself. This 600-mile diameter sun, called Sol, Afsu, traveled through the great hole called the Abyss for a distance of 3,963 miles to the center of the half of the planet Tiamat, which the west wind bore a hole through called Ki, now called Earth, from the word Iridu. So, it was indeed one of the satellites of Nibiru, called Winds, from Meldek, that crashed into Tiamat, and not Nibiru itself. The Voltex, troglodytes that manned this ship that crashed, survived and thrived in the seas of this new planet called Ki, or Gaia, even Gi, once called Tiamat, which much later became known as Earth, from Iridu, starting the restoration or reconstruction of life on Earth, including evolutionary processes of plant and animal life. Now the last of the winds, the south wind, crashed into Ki and created the Grand Canyon, and gave birth to other small planets in its own orbit and rotation around this newly formed planet, Ki, which became the moon that you see today, creating a lunar orbit called Shiski, meaning celestial deity who protects Earth, Ki, and called Kingu, which had become chief among them, ruled by Luna, which Murdoch Nibiru made shrink as a doge, mass of lifeless clay, and thrown into outer space to wobble in its own orbit, deprived of its orbital momentum. Kingu was reduced to the status of a mere satellite, Amun, today known as Sirius, which is today known as the largest of the minor planets and or asteroids. The upper half of the planet Tiamat, which became oval-shaped after the moon had broke away, was now 7,926 miles in diameter and 24,896 miles in circumference, and it was set for replenishing or restoration on the part of the great star fleet responsible for its damage. The newly formed planet Ki was trapped in its orbit, protected by forces sent from the guidance of 4 ships that were part of the 11th from the fleet from Nibiru, of which 2 returned back to Ilium to inform them of what had been happening. Now, this new planet has 2 suns, one in its belly, 3,963 miles from its surface, creating an inner tropical environment, and the other sun, Shamash, was 93 million miles away from Ki surface. Ki was now trapped in its new orbit around the outer sun, Shamash, to create a year of 365 days. Thus, a new time zone was created for this new planet. The south wind, crashing into Tiamat, also created a black dust cloud that cut off Earth from the sun. So, now you have 2 sets of planets separated by this asteroid belt, created the inner and outer planets. The inner planets were Mummu, Mercury, Lahamu, Venus, Ki, Earth, Shiski, Moon, and Lahmu, Mars. The outer planets were Kishar, Jupiter, Anshar, Saturn, whose planet is Rum, Titan, Anu, Uranus, Neptune, and now Uzmi, Pluto, previously called Gaga, separated by this asteroid belt and the remains of the lost planet Meldek. So 1/2 of the original Tiamat is an asteroid belt, and the other half is presently your planet called Ki, Earth.